want to take a moment to show solidarity to the Asian community and Asian Americans. Yesterday's news was terrifying and a hate crime. And we, as Impact Travel Alliance, as an organization, as well as myself individually, show solidarity to our Asian community. And we do have some resources that we've shared on our Instagram. And those are available via Living Hyphen, which is a fantastic resource. And they have an anti-racism and anti-oppression toolkit that they have put together. And that is a living and collaborative resource. You can find it on our Instagram or their Instagram. I also highly recommend, there's an article that Rachel Chang came out with yesterday on travel and leisure. And it's about ways that you can support the Asian community right now. So those are all available on our Instagram. Attendees will be receiving an email afterwards as well. And again, most importantly with all of this, I really just wanted to show solidarity to the Asian community and let you all know that we see you, we hear you, and we're working toward fighting for a more inclusive and welcoming world as well as travel industry. So looking at today's event, we are of course talking about Latina entrepreneurs who inspire us to travel the world. I am so excited to introduce our panelists in just a few moments. Today, I feel very fortunate that in addition to these three amazing women being inspiring entrepreneurs, I'm fortunate to also call them my friends. So I'm very excited that I was able to reach out to them and ask them to share their stories. And I'm glad that also they know each other as well. And they will be able to just have a conversation that you all can listen to and hear more about their stories and their perspectives. If we haven't connected before, my name is Kelly, and I'm the founder and executive director of Impact Travel Alliance. ITA is a global community and nonprofit, and our vision is to improve the world through travel. We do this by educating travelers how to explore in a way that has a positive impact on local communities and our environment. Within the travel industry, there has, of course, especially within the last year, been a lot more talk about representation and diversity and inclusion within the industry. But one trend that I've seen is that even when talking about representation, far too often there's so many panels or groups that are kind of like, we have one Latina person, we have one Black person, we have one Indigenous person, which is just insane because of course no one person can speak for their entire community or entire cultures that are different from place to place and community to community. So in light of International Women's Month this month, I wanted to bring together a group of badass women who are doing really cool things in their lives and really just give them the platform to talk more about their work, what they're doing, and how they're making the world better through travel, through their own personal endeavors. So without further ado, I am going to pass it off to Jeannette. Jeannette will be our host for today's event. There's, of course, as well significance in having a host who comes from this perspective and is able to guide and shape the conversation in a way that she's speaking from a Latina perspective herself. So that was really important for me as well. So I will pass the mic off to her and let you all take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. I'm so honored that you asked me, and also what you're doing with Impact Travel Alliance. For years, I just love your mission and purpose. So I'm always happy to be a part of what you're doing. And thank you for giving us Latinas this space and this platform to share our stories and to use our voices, especially in the travel industry. Lola, Carmen, I'm so excited to virtually meet you ladies here. And yeah, so a little bit about me. My background, my purpose really was from a child. As a young girl, I thought I wanted to be Christiana Amanpour and do international reporting. And then I changed the channel to Discovery Channel, History Channel, Travel Channel. And I saw the likes of Samantha Brown, Anthony Bourdain, Rick Steves, all of all of those hosts who were showing me the world. However, I really didn't see a Latina at the time. So that it kind of made me feel not seen as a young girl. I didn't understand. But moving in the future, it propelled me into my purpose, which is as a woman, as a Latina, to be a voice in this industry. So it's a little background about me. Um, but I would love to introduce you to our other amazing panelists, Lola and Carmen. Would you like to introduce yourselves to our audience and tell us about any of the projects that you're working on and anything else you'd like to share with us? We can start with you, Lola.
Carmen and I are making eyes at each other like, you go. Hi, everyone. I'm Lola Mendez. I'm Uruguayan American. I'm currently in Uruguay, where I've been throughout the duration of the pandemic. I happened to be here for 6 days last March when we had our first cases and our borders closed. I decided to hunker down, and I've been really fortunate to be here and be close to family. And it's been an amazing year to get to know my heritage and my culture as an adult. You know, I visited many, many times as a child, but nothing compares to living in the place. So I was kind of thrown into it. It wasn't necessarily a decision I made myself, but that's really been the silver lining for me, is that I've had time to learn more about my ancestry and what makes me who I am. I'm currently I'm a journalist. I don't know how much of a travel journalist I am anymore. That all changed last year, but I'm still writing about travel in ways that I'm actually really proud of. I've gotten to write a lot more about sustainability this year. So initially, a year ago when everything started to change, I was really worried that all the work for 5 years that I'd been putting into becoming a travel journalist was kind of redundant, but I've actually seen such a larger interest in sustainability this year. So I've gotten to continually write about the intersection of sustainability and tourism. I'm currently working on a piece about how Monaco is becoming a leader in sustainability for Architectural Digest. So there are still opportunities out there to write about travel in a way that is mindful of this current moment. Prior to the pandemic, I have been traveling full-time for 5 years. I've been to 64 countries. I became a travel journalist along the way. I had left New York, where I was a publicist in the fashion industry almost exactly 6 years ago, and just wanted to experience the world. I was tired of being at a desk. I really felt like there was so much more to see and do, and I took this complete leap of faith into the unknown. I didn't have anything set up. I didn't have contacts. I didn't know how I was going to make money. I just figured it out as I went, which was naive, but the best decision I've ever made. And yeah, in the last year I've been in Uruguay, traveling within my own country, and I'm about to go next week to a part of the country I've never been to before called Salto, which is where we have hot thermal baths. So I'm looking forward to relaxing for a few days, and I'll hand it over to you, Carmen.
Hi, I'm Carmen Portella. I'm born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I've been in the travel and tourism industry, I will say now, without saying my age, for like 19 to 20 years. I started young. I think I have had a very interesting career in the travel and tourism industry since I cover different sectors. I worked for 6 years for the Puerto Rico Tourism Board when I was very young. It was very formative years for me. And my background is in marketing and PR. So I work in the marketing and public relations department for the Puerto Rico Tourism Company for 6 years. After that, I decided to build different businesses. They're all tied into the tourism industry. The first one was the first social media and content agency in the Caribbean tailored for the travel and tourism industry. On those days, we had clients from flagship hotels, outfitters, you name it. But one morning, we were working on an internal project in our social media agency. And I talked to my team and I say, hey, we were been working in this new project this was back in 2015, for a year now, which was called Local Guest. And it was based on sustainable travel and sustainable tourism. The Caribbean is not known for sustainability. It's known for mass tourism. You know, we have beaches, we have pina coladas, but travelers they didn't have visibility to other type of experiences, right? Experiences that we as local live daily in the island, from the community center that does nature walks, to ecotourism experiences that were off the beaten path, but still beautiful, but they were not part of bigger advertisement for the island. So we closed our social media agency and only kept clients that were mission driven. I think that was like a moment that I had, like a moment of, hey, I really want to use my knowledge to really infuse sustainability through travel in my country and open up opportunities for other entrepreneurs that also had this vision. I think this is the way that you change your country slowly but surely, changing and open up access to people to really get to know the true nature of our country. We worked with local guests for 5 years. We were in numerous startup competitions locally, which we're very grateful to be at. And the pandemic hit on, last year by this time. We were in this tech accelerator that was looking to create, a technology that would connect consumer-based projects, community-based projects with the mass part of tourism. And when it hit, as Lola was mentioning, we were thinking like, wow, 5 years in the making, all this hard work of building and co-creating like more than 30 local projects. And when you talk sustainability in the Caribbean, this is not an easy task. We're not talking about big numbers. We're talking about niche. We're talking about smaller projects that do make a difference when a group of travelers arrive, So we lost all our year in 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of February. We worked with a lot of corporate social responsibility groups, and they were all canceled in 2 weeks. So our business disappeared in 2 weeks. So being part of this accelerator gave us the opportunity to think fast. So we pivoted into a new endeavor that's called Bana. And I'm grateful to have a lot of collaborators that have helped us along the way. And Bana basically works through sustainability, but not only thinking about travel. What we thought is like, if we're seeing that travelers are having difficulties understanding how to travel more responsibly, probably it's because they're also having difficulties understanding how to live more responsibly, how to have a more sustainable life, and how to change our day-to-day habits. So there's where Bana comes in. We basically are a community that connects and educates sustainability through different pillars, sustainable living. So that's what we've been working for the last 5 to 6 months. So we launched a whole new project during the pandemic. I have a very awesome team, a women-led team, and I feel very proud to continue to create and build opportunities, not only for ourselves, but also for other women in our communities.
Thank you, Carmen and Lola, who are fabulous at what they're doing and really leaders in the travel industry. And you both touched on 2 topics, which is sustainable travel and tourism. And why is that so important? And for anyone, for example, any of our attendees who's interested in the travel and tourism industry as maybe an entrepreneur, what is sustainable travel and tourism and why is it so important? We can start with you, Lola.
That's such a heavy question. There's no wrong answer. There's so many things that play into sustainability, but I think as far as it comes to tourism, it's so important that we're mindful when we're visiting places that are not our homes, and that we are respectful to the people that are allowing us to come and visit where they live. For them, it's not a vacation, it's where they live. And traveling with a sustainable mindset can help us do so in a way that doesn't leave a negative impact behind us. So often when we talk about sustainability, we only talk about the environment. But for me, there is no sustainability without the interaction of environment and social sustainability. They go hand in hand. So being conscious of the way that employees are treated at the hotel that you stay at, or going to a locally owned restaurant owned by someone who's actually from the community, maybe rather than an expat who opened up a pizza shop in Thailand or something. Those little decisions that you make can actually make a really big impact and support the people who are from that community. So it's a never-ending journey. And once you get into it, you will realize there will always be more things that you can do that you didn't even think about yet. I've been trying to travel sustainably for at least, I'd say like 4.5, 5 years. When I was living in Europe, it wasn't something I thought about at all. I bought a plastic water bottle on my way to work every day. I grew up being conscious. My family, we always use reusable bags. My mom was really good about making sure we turned the lights off in the house and we didn't waste food, but there's so much more that can be done. And I think it's important as you go into this journey of becoming a sustainable tourist to be gentle with yourself. I rode an elephant in Thailand in 2015. And that's my fault and my fault only. I didn't do the research. I didn't have time. I was working as a teacher in Spain and I had 1 month vacation and I just made a list of the things I wanted to do. And when I got to Thailand, figured out how to do them. I didn't even think twice about it. And I'd actually already been a vegetarian for like 10 years at that point. So you would think animal cruelty would have been at front of mind for me, but it just wasn't. And I went to a place, I'm going to name them because now they're no longer doing elephant rides, Chai Lai Orchid. And I actually had seeked out that particular place because they only employed women who had been rescued from sex slavery. So for me, I was women first, and I really thought I was making the right decision to go to this place because I wanted to ride an elephant. I wanted to do it bareback because I knew the boxes weren't good. I'd heard that somewhere and I wanted to support women. And when I was there, the woman who hosted me was pregnant and I was telling her how I wanted to go see tigers. And she broke down into tears and explained to me how harmful the different tiger kingdoms and tiger places that you can go and see were. And I had no idea. So I share that to just tell you that I'm not perfect. I've made so many mistakes along the way. Don't be hard on yourself for the decisions that you made in the past, because what you are responsible for are the decisions you make once you know the impact of your choices.
Beautifully said, Lola. Thank you, Carmen.
Wow, going after that. Sustainability. I think that I can include some thoughts around what is to be a responsible traveler now during COVID times too, especially with what we're seeing around the world, especially USA, with some of the travelers that have arrived to Puerto Rico or arriving to other states. I think that something very important is that you have to follow the laws of the places that you're traveling to, especially during COVID times. Be mindful and respectful that where you're traveling, people live, and we are all going through a pandemic. And especially if you're going to a place that may not have the best healthcare available for everybody. But when we talk about sustainability, for us, when we started working and understanding better sustainability, we found this term. It's called the triple bottom line. It's basically people, place, and profit. And through that, you segment into 3 areas: people, the experiences, or where I'm staying, or my whole traveling experience. Does it affect positively the locals? Does it give back to the locals? Did I did my research well around traveling, where I'm staying, what I'm consuming, right? Consume local. What does it mean to consume local? Make sure that the places that you go to eat do support the local food supply system, right? And this is something very important in islands like Puerto Rico or islands in the Caribbean, which a lot of our products are imported. So when you get away from the mainstream and start seeing supporting the local shop that is supporting the agriculture, or supporting 5 different farmers to bring food to our tables, then you see in the multiplying effect of how our tourism dollars are really affecting positively the people. The environment. I think that in order, it's super important, of course, not to beat yourself up, because this term is around the imperfect environmentalist, right? The system is not built for us to be completely sustainable, but there's things that we can do. And it's not only part of traveling, it's part of our day-to-day lives. As Lola mentioned, have your reusable bottle of water. Include that as part of your habits. If you do it daily, then you'll do it also when you're traveling, and you will not create plastic or consume plastic where you are from. Travel with your reusable utensils. This is something that I daily now have: my reusable bag with my reusable bottle, my utensils, and sometimes even a cup. So again, in this trip that I arrived yesterday, and I brought a couple of reusable cups, and we used it so many times in a trip, and that's when you see like, wow, maybe 40 times we didn't use plastic because I travel with this reusable cups. Also support environmental conservation projects. A lot of them have experiences that you're giving back, but also enjoying ecotourism activities. So for us, sustainability and what we've been working with local guests is how to make sure that the tourism dollars stay in Puerto Rico. And that's something that a lot of the experiences or more mainstream experiences don't do. So I'm not saying don't stay in a hotel, in a flagship hotel, but I'm saying if you're staying in a flagship hotel, make sure that you're infusing your tourism dollars somewhere else in the country. Is it through eating out or excursions, nature excursions and walking tours? There's a lot of possibilities now, especially coming from an island that there's so much outdoors, right? So that would be my 2 cents on sustainability.
So great. Thank you, Carmen. And you and Lola gave some great sustainable travel tips as well. So those are some good ones, even some I didn't know about. So we'll transition just for time into entrepreneurship as a Latina in the travel space. So I was reading some, gosh, I can never say this word, statistics. I was reading and catching up on some statistics and by the Hispanic Star. And there was one that said by 2060, it's estimated that 1 out of every 3 women in the US will be Latina. And lots of more amazing statistics. I'm not even gonna say that word. A lot of important data. So that being said, Lola, we can start with you. Why is it important to create more space for Latinas as a Latina in travel?
I think it's especially important in tourism, especially in the US tourism market where so many tourists are going to Latin America. That's important to have representation within, so you know what you're expecting. For instance, once I was on a trip in Spain, in Barcelona, and at the time I was a marketing director for a travel company that was taking American study abroad students around Europe on the weekends by bus. And the girls came up to me and they're like, "Oh, you're Latina." And I was like, "Yes," the passengers. It's like, "I am." Like, "Where can we get a burrito in Barcelona?" And I was like, "What?" Like, first off, burritos don't come from my country. Like, just because I'm Latina doesn't mean I know where to find burritos all over the world. And also, what does Barcelona have to do with burritos, you know? And they truly could not make a disconnect between Spain and Mexico, Uruguay. For them, it was all the same. All these Spanish-speaking countries, or even the non-Spanish-speaking countries within Latin America, were a monolith to them. So I think having representation within the tourism industry from Latinas or just Latinx people in general from different countries shows how diverse this region is and how many different experiences you can have. I mean, just thinking about the amount of food you can eat and the different flavors you can try could take weeks to talk about, right? And then let alone the different topography, the different geography that you can experience, whether it's snorkeling with whale sharks from an ethical distance or hiking up to a beautiful waterfall. You know, the opportunities are endless in this region. And unfortunately, I see so many tourists that come to Latin America going just to an all-inclusive resort, staying on the property. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there are some amazing all-inclusives that are giving back to their community through different ways. But there's kind of an undertone of like fear-mongering there, you know, that they feel like they aren't safe to leave the property. So by having representation within the industry in the US and people from the community speaking out about all the amazing things you can do offsite and how safe it is to do, it's not just sustainable, but you're gonna have a more meaningful experience. You're gonna have a more meaningful adventure that could be transformative.
I love that. Carmen, what do you think?
I'll say that from an entrepreneur point of view, having more representation as a Latina in the startup space, especially in travel, would have made me, when I was thinking about this business, would have made me more comfortable, would have made me feel that this was possible. And when you start walking the walk, and building with other women, especially also women. The tourism industry, as for lots of years, have been male dominated. And the G suites and the GMs, most of them have been men for years and years. I've seen a shift. Believe me, I like in 20 years, I've seen a big shift. And when you start building and creating and co-creating with other women and other Latina women, you start opening up spaces, and then you start hearing more voices saying, hey, I want to build something too. I want to create in this space. I love the travel space. So is this open for us to build? Can we dream of creating our own companies and solving problems that we see for in the industry through our business? So as you said very early on, Jeannette, around when you were watching Samantha Brown and seeing all this women that are American leading up the way, you're like, wait, but where's my culture? Where are my people also traveling, talking about their beautiful and awesome experiences around the world and how to be responsible while doing it? So representation is important because it creates and opens up the conversation for more opportunity for everybody.
I love that. And what you talked about earlier, Lola, about we're not monolith. I think in the US, especially within the last year, a lot of Americans have taken notice because of the recent election, a lot of other things. They just put a lot of Latinas and Latinos in one group. So it's good that we have this platform and more voices, more representation to share, like your example. Burrito does not have anything to do with Spain. I mean, just to talk to people about our culture and our country, where we are, or where we're going to go, where our family is from. For example, my family is from Mexico, or my parents are from Mexico City, and there's a lot of stereotypes about Mexico, unfortunately, as well. And it's just every time I meet someone, it's an opportunity for them to learn more about, for example, my history, my culture in Mexico. So I think it's great we have more representation, more diversity. You both touched on sustainability, which is also important. Another thing, a topic that if you're both interested in talking about, is equity. I mean, how we are being valued and paid for what we're doing. I don't know if you have any experience in that. I personally have been, experienced just on the low end, but now I know my worth, and so that's no more crumbs for me. But what about you, Lola or Carmen, and how do you feel that's moving forward,
So I wanted to piggyback off of something that we were just talking about too, about entrepreneurship. It also helps Latina travelers know they can travel. When I was traveling for those 5 years, mostly in Asia, I met 5 or 6 Latinas traveling. And that's why I created an Instagram account called Latinas Love Travel with my sister, just to show people that we're out here. We are traveling. We can travel. We should travel. And there's so many opportunities for us outside of the region to experience the world and to feel safe and to be welcome. So, that's a responsibility I feel I carry, and I'm sure Carmen feels the same way, showing other Latinas, not just from the entrepreneurial standpoint, but also from the tourism and travel standpoint, that this is out there for us too. So as far as equity goes, I have a lot of thoughts on this. And this last September and October, which was between Hispanic Heritage Month in the US, and then October is when Latina Equal Pay Day hits, I had more work than ever as a journalist. And I think a lot of that played into the fact that editors were looking to me because they probably didn't have a lot of other Latina journalists that they could turn to. I appreciate the work. That work doesn't come year round, and I don't get to tell these stories year round, and that's deeply frustrating. And for Latina Equal Pay Day, which I believe was October 26th, which means that Latinas have to work 11 more months to their white counterparts to make the same amount of money in the United States. So one of the articles I wrote was for a publication for a section that I later found out usually pays $100 more than I was paid. So I wrote about Latina Equal Pay Day and was paid $100 less than my white counterparts. It's infuriating. Why? For another publication that I wrote about Latina Equal Pay Day, it took them 5 months to pay me. That even when you're making noise and raising awareness about the lack of equity within this community, you're still getting the short end of the stick. And I advocate for myself a lot. I negotiate all of my rates. I'm told all the time, like, wow, not just women, no, women never negotiate. Like, it's so surprising that you're negotiating. Oh, I'm so proud of you for advocating for yourself. It's because I approach my work as a business, and I want to be paid fairly. So even like you said, Jeannette, I know my worth, but it's such a struggle to get to earn that. And that goes far beyond just the travel industry. And I think it's a challenge that Latinas face. I know it's a challenge that Latinas face across all industries, because I interviewed healthcare workers. I interviewed someone who works at Google, and all about their experiences getting less pay simply because they're Latina. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but there's something about, even if we have higher education than our white counterparts, we're still earning less. So even if you have a master's degree, you have the same experience as your white counterpart, they're still earning more than you, purely because of their name or their skin color or where their family comes from. That's outrageous. And I wrote another article about the barriers that I face just based on my name when I'm submitting an application to something, and the assumptions that somebody might make about me, about my citizenship, about my English level. It's outrageous, that I sometimes want to use my mom's maiden name and another first name and just see what happens.
It's so outrageous. And I just want to piggyback really quickly, because also the whole concept of, for me too, learning to negotiate over 8-10 years now, speaking about specifically Latinos and travel industry, speaking about diversity, I'm glad that the industry is becoming more aware and more receptive and making differences. But the whole thing of like, I'm doing this for free for exposure, or like giving crumbs, when, people like, I personally, I'm so beyond that, because it's kind of insulting in a way. Like for me, I don't need additional exposure. I don't need to speak for free. Like, I'm a trained speaker, I'm a trained journalist. Like, it's insulting in a way. And then when you find out other people, or maybe influencers, get paid or getting paid, and you're just like, what? We're doing the same thing. And I'm just, there's a whole nother story to that. But understanding your worth and your value and what you bring to the table, and your voice is important, and diversity is really important, especially as a Latina. Another data that I saw in the Hispanic Star was that Latinas are made, I think it was 47% less than people with the same job. Right. So we are definitely not getting the equity or the offers that we should. And we bring so much to the table. Also, if we are bilingual, if we're fluent in another language, that is an asset. Right. So there's just so much to that. So I'm really glad. Thank you for sharing, Lola. Carmen, what do you think?
Well, I will also talk about investment in Latina entrepreneurship projects. I have seen how fellow men, or I have get investment for projects extremely similar with less traction and less and ethics that are not at all responsible. So yes, it is very frustrating as a Latina woman looking for social impact investment when you're talking about your business. And sometimes you're treated like you're granola eating hippie, when you really are just talking about how we all need to make a conscious choice with our daily consumer decisions. So it's been very frustrating, but through the positive side, I have, since working through sustainable travel in Puerto Rico, like 90-something% of the 30-something projects that we work in Puerto Rico are all women-led. And when we started this, we created our own little ecosystem. They were like, oh, so my experience is $15. I'm like, no, your experience is $60. That's the cost of your time, your effort, your knowledge. That's what a traveler will pay. So instead of this, they leaving this in the hotel, make sure that the pricing structures for, like, you get paid fairly. So that's something that we also have established in every single one of our endeavors. Fair trade, right? If everybody's being paid fairly for their time, their effort, then there's no inequality. This is a conscious choice that we make daily to help each single of our suppliers to know their value too, and know the value of their experience in other parts of the world and what travelers face for them. And it was eye-opening how sometimes even ourselves, we undervalue our worth. And if we go a little bit deeper, it has to do a lot with our history, how our countries were built. Puerto Rico spent 400 years colonized by Spain, and then 100 and something years at the territory of the United States. So for us, when we talk about being a Latina and being Puerto Rican and also being American, it's like a whole mixture of things, right? It's a whole mixture that not a lot of people will understand. And I was having this conversation with my friends the other day around preparing for this talk, because I wanted to represent well my country and my people, and being a woman and Latina in the tourism industry. And there was conversations around how being a US citizen and having a passport does give us some type of privilege. And it does in some occasions, but it also brings an underlying tone that for me saying privilege in a way that when we're being for so many years handed in like a second-class citizen is hard, right? So is this all undertones about minority on top of minority and cultural inequality? That is, I think it's another topic for another panel, but yes.
And yes, and definitely speaking about culture and community, just going what Kelly talked about, what is happening in other communities as well. Just wanted to ask if you wanted to touch on how can we, the Latino community and Latinx community, be an ally and supportive to not only just our community, right, but to other communities, like the Asian community, like the Black community, like everybody. How can we also, like, what do you guys think?
I wrote a piece a few years ago, maybe about 2 years ago. ICE was targeting people who had come over from Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, during the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and deporting 85-year-olds, right? So I wrote a piece for Me Too, which is a Latinx publication, about the need for intersection between the Asian and the Latino communities, because we've just been taught to be so separated and that we have no similarities, and it's just not the case. You know, as immigrants or the children of immigrants, we have so many similar hardships that we face, and we're so much stronger if we join forces. You know, that there's kind of this misconception that ICE is just about Latinx immigrants, and it's not the case. You know, that right now ICE is targeting Haitians. ICE has been targeting Southeast Asians. ICE has been targeting Latinos. So if we all took all the efforts that we're individually doing as communities, Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Asian, and came together, we'd be so much stronger and be able to see change faster that we would all benefit from. And something I've been thinking about a lot the last few days is we need to support each other even in times where we aren't being murdered. You know, it's amazing that we can step up and be there for each other when it's one community that's more in the spotlight or facing more of a crisis, but we need to have that connectivity constantly. It can only benefit us. You know, that there's this I don't know, this concept that we're all pinned against each other, and we can only get further if there's someone else beneath us, which is something that I've seen amongst a lot of immigrants that I've talked to, you know, even in my own family, that you have to be, someone has to be beneath you for you to be closer to whiteness, closer to greatness, closer to success. And that is a myth that was created to pin us against each other. So if we can dispel that myth and come together, we'll be stronger than ever. You know, that we, as immigrants, we're about to outnumber white people in the United States. You know, that calling us minorities is ridiculous, because we are not the minority, we are the majority. You know, people of color and descendants of recent immigrants, we are the majority. And we need to take up that space and demand justice and demand equity and demand change, because the issues that are killing people in our community and in every community, it's the same issue. It's white supremacy. If we can band together and speak up against it in everyday life, you know, not just in cases of of mass murder, I think we'll see a difference. And I don't mean to put the burden on our shoulders. The burden is on white people. White people are the people who need to change. We don't need to change anything that we are doing except be more supportive of one another.
Carmen, would you like to add?
I think Lola, you hit the spot. I think it has to do with unity. I think that getting together in order to change, to create change is the way to go. I think that for sure, for years and years we've been majority. They just want to make us feel that we're not. And it's our duty to stand together and create the change that we want to see, right? And support each other, and build a better place. Because there's no other way if we don't do it together. And definitely, it doesn't only needs to happen when people are getting murdered. It is a very tough subject, because anywhere you see it's a civil rights violation, right? And we all deserve to be protected. We all deserve to have a way of living that is safe, and that we are all included and never disrespected for our beliefs, for who we are, where we were born, where our parents are, the color of our skin. And I wish that in the future we could see a world that is like that. Like, there's no need to call anybody majority or minority. We're just humans, and that would be beautiful. That would be beautiful.
Thank you, Carmen and Lola, and I'm with you all. I just think we, the camaraderie and being supportive of each other, not just in the difficult times, but at all times. And I've always felt like a global citizen. So for me, it's anyone in the community that is being targeted or just not feeling seen or heard is it's like a ripple effect. It hurts me. Like, I don't like it. So I think as individuals, we can each, do our part, but as a community, as a global community, we can really move mountains. So it's good that we're having these difficult, but conversations that we're having right now. And unfortunately, time is of the essence. We're running out of time, but we will go ahead and start with the last few minutes we have with any Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, I think there's
I'm going to jump in. We do have a couple of questions already. Leslie asked in the chat, she said, how do you find opportunities in travel, especially as a journalist and entrepreneur?
That's a good question. And I know Leslie. Leslie is an amazing reporter in Austin, Texas. Hi, Leslie. She also has the News Yogi. I'll just start off. My background is more in broadcast journalism, so I've done more in TV in that way. Lola, I know you're really great at publications as well. So I'll just touch on the broadcast part. For me, it's just really it's been a long journey, but I've just found the ways to tell the stories. And like I said, if you are bilingual, that is an asset to any market or publication. And I think that over the years, what I've seen over and over is that travel is not just leisure. It's not just about leisure. It's also, like we talked about sustainability, human interest, civil rights. What is happening right now is affecting a lot of people. So I think that understanding the travel and tourism industry, where you want to specifically cover or what you want to write about is important, but it's not just leisure. I think there's this belief that travel is only leisure. Travel is so much more in depth. So I think that a way is to find out what you're most passionate about or where you see a missing link. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, from the entrepreneurial sector, I can say that it's easier when you are deep in grassroots in your community and understand the idiosyncrasies of that ecosystem and the necessities of that ecosystem. Building and you create to solve the problem or a gap that you see in the chain, right? In the tourism chain or in the tourism industry. And basically all of the projects that we have created have been as a response to a necessity or a problem that the community has, or as a country that we have. And that's how we have built through working. You start working and you see situations and problems that needs to be fixed, either through technology, either through a project, and that's how we have started always.
Just to add to that, from a travel journalist perspective, I think as Latinas, we have a built-in advantage because we most likely know two countries, not just the United States, but maybe we've also had the chance to visit the country of our father, our mother, our cousin, whoever it is that we visited. So I think you can utilize that to position yourself as an expert in that place. Of course, if you visited a lot, if you went once when you were 5, probably not the case. And start to reach out to editors with your personal stories of this place that people visit, and tap into your community, your network there, that you can interview people who are actually on the ground and go and report on a piece from within the community. And I'm seeing a change in travel publications starting to realize that that's what they need to do. I wrote a piece about racism within the travel media industry, and how there's this thing called parachute journalism, where if someone just goes to a place for 2 days and then all of a sudden they want to be the expert on Thailand and they want to write everything about Thailand. Like, I have spent probably 6 months non-consecutive in Thailand, and I am not an expert on Thailand. And should I have the opportunity to write about Thailand, you would not be hearing my opinions about Thailand. I'd be interviewing Thai people about what they wanted people to know about their country. And I think being Latina, we also have a sense of why it's important to raise up other voices and not our own, because we've had so many people speak incorrectly or out of line about our own communities. So we can take some of those negative experiences and transform them to make us better journalists and to make us do right by the cultures and the communities that we're writing by. So I think those are ways to kind of tap into your identity, to elevate yourself as a travel journalist. Of course, right now it's still very difficult to be a travel journalist. You have to find ideas that are tied into COVID. Right now, that might be about countries that are opening or acquiring vaccinations or offering free quarantine to tourists. And unfortunately, that's kind of a lot of what the marketplace is looking for right now, which can be exhausting. I got burnt out of writing about those types of stories quite quickly. Or I don't know if anyone tapped in earlier when we were talking about travel anxiety. So like, that's a take that I've landed recently, talking a lot about how sustainability has to be the way as we move forward with the tourism industry. So just trying to find a niche news hook for the stories that you want to tell, rather than, oh, I was in this country 5 years ago and it was really pretty. Like, why does that story need to be told now? I think it's more important than ever to think of the timeliness of the ideas that you want to write.
I think another good point is, instead of right now, like what Lola, you're just talking about where to travel, because in the travel industry, in the world, these are such uncertain times and it's ever changing. It's also maybe, instead of where, how, or maybe a human interest focus, right? So it's not where to go or top 10 places to go. Maybe it's, well, let's find out about the locals in some country, or find something that, or like you were saying, well-being, right? Which is something that we're all going through in different ways, but it can help us all, right? Because we're all going through this global pandemic together. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. But back to you, Kelly.
We have a question in the Q&A box from an anonymous attendee. And they asked, they said, research shows that only a fraction of Latino people know what Latinx is, and only 3% use the term. I understand why it was created, but in Spanish language, it's even pronounced differently. As Latinos, do you embrace the term Latinx? Do you feel like it is an agenda? And just make sure we are being thoughtful, but also not pushing an agenda created outside of the community. Also, this person said how to pronounce it in Spanish, and I'm sorry that I don't know how to pronounce that. I am learning Spanish right now, but I'm going to let one of you explain how that is pronounced in Spanish as well.
I can go ahead and start if you want. Latinx, what I'm familiar with, it is a newer term, about 20 years or so introduced. But from my understanding, the reason why we use, or the Latinx term is used, is because it's gender neutral. So it's to have a more inclusive and to be more conscious of, within the, because when people would say Latino, usually they would say masculine, or Latina, feminine. Latinx is gender neutral, so it's being more inclusive of everybody. And I think it's a good term. It's in my experience, what I do as a journalist is when I'm covering a story, and this is what a professor told me recently, was I was at a Latino conference, and it was ask the source, ask your source, how do you want to be identified? Don't just assume, and don't just, even being Latina, I never assume. So I ask my source, okay, how would you like to be identified? And it could change depending on the source or the person that you're talking to. So as we're building more inclusive travel movement, it's just being very conscious of everybody. So that's what I think. Lola or Carmen?
Yeah, I'm still learning a lot about these terms, and I've had quite the roller coaster of thoughts about Latinx, Latino, Latini over the last 5 years. I was initially really against it because I felt like the Spanish language was continued to be anglicized, because I grew up accepting Latino as being everyone who is of Latin descent. I never felt like that didn't include me. But I am also cisgendered and identify as a woman. So I started to use Latinx because I never wanted to exclude non-binary and trans, Latino, Latinx, Latini people. And I also feel the same way about Hispanic, which was the term that was put onto us during a census, that these aren't terms people use in Latin America. In Uruguay, no one's referring to themselves as Latina, they're Uruguayan, And so 4 or 5 years ago, when I started to write as a journalist, when editors would change me calling myself Latina to Latinx, I would tell them I'm not comfortable with that. I identify as Latina. And I started to use Latinx about a few years later because I wanted to make sure my work was inclusive. I never want anyone to feel like they're not included in my narrative because of the word I've used. And then moving to Latin America, it's been the last year and a half here in Uruguay, I've seen that here it's actually Latin E with an E at the end. And knowing that that's what is being used in a country in South America, that the actual majority, all the people here are from Latin America, that's what I began to use. Because for me, it feels less anglicized. It feels less like American English speakers trying to change our language. I often wonder why the same conversation isn't happening about other Romance languages, Italian, French, Portuguese, what may it be, where they also use a masculine term to discuss everybody. So like I said, I'm still learning. I feel very comfortable using Latini. I've had a hard time getting publications to use it because it's not common in the United States. Latinx is what's used in the US, so I accept that in my articles now. But Latin E is something you can say in Spanish. It's something that's being used in Spanish-speaking countries. So for me, that feels more true to our community and our language.
I'm also learning a lot about this. And I think that any way that we want to speak to our culture, right, has to come from a place of respect and inclusion. And as Lola and Jeannette was stating, I will never want to use a term that will make others not feel included, especially when they're going through a process of understanding who they are or how. I will never want to do that. So I personally don't use the term Latinx because in Puerto Rico, we're Puerto Ricans, as you were saying with Uruguayans. This is not something that we use, and it may come from the la idiosincrasias, or who we are as a country, right? As we are a territory, we have American passports, but we live in the Caribbean and we're Latino. So, and it goes deeper, and it goes deeper for everybody. But from my personal understanding with my own culture, sometimes when you go to look for your race, you're like, I'm not represented here. And it's go to a deeper topic. So I understand and support any movement or any word that will feel anybody feel included. And if Latino is the word, or Latina is the word, if Latinx is the word, if Latina is the word, as Lola was stating, I think that the most important thing right now is asking, how do you refer to yourself? And that's the first step to being inclusive, and that's the first step to understanding other ways of life, other ways of living, and just accepting everybody, right?
Absolutely. I think it's also like a multi-generational thing, because I feel like the older generations, like, what's this Latinx? What's this Latinx? So I think it's just introducing the, what it means, and then leaving it to every individual if they want to be, identified as that, or if they want to or not. So I think both Lola and Carmen really touched on amazing points, and thank you both. I'm so appreciative of what you all do in the travel industry. I admire you, I follow you, and I support you. So thank you so much.
I hate to jump in here. I could listen to you all talk all day. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. We are just about out of time. As a couple of quick housekeeping notes, I did want to share, this is not our event, but it was put on my radar, and I am so glad that I found it. In 2 days, on March 20th and 21st, is the Latino Travel Fest, which is a full event that dives much deeper into many of these topics. And I'm so glad that there is more space being created for conversations like this. So I just shared that registration in the chat, and I encourage you all to attend if you're interested in learning more about topics like these. From Impact Travel Alliance, we have several upcoming events. We have next Thursday, so a week from today, we have another event on women, and we will be celebrating women-led social entrepreneurship projects and travel. And we have 2 fantastic speakers from community-based tourism projects in Indonesia and Nepal. So I'm really excited to hear their perspectives. And then we also have, at the end of the month, all month long, we've been talking about the intersection of travel and women's empowerment. And so we're hosting an event in collaboration with our friends from Wonderful that will be a traveler meetup, where it's going to be one-on-one, where you're able to connect with different attendees and share more about your perspectives. You'll meet several different people throughout the session itself. So it'll be a really cool way to come together at the end of the month after this content that we've been producing that's focused on women's empowerment, inclusivity, and thinking about how we can empower women through travel. So those are both on our website at impacttravelalliance.org. Next month in April, we'll be kicking off our new theme, which is focused on protecting our planet. Many of the themes that our speakers touched upon today about sustainability and the environment, we'll be diving deeper into those topics in April, starting with our event on April 1st, the Savvy Traveler's Guide to Going Green. So again, you can find all of those on our website at impacttravelalliance.org. You can also follow us on Instagram to stay in the loop about our upcoming events, and our handle is Impact Travel Alliance. I do have a tradition where I like to always leave the mic with our speakers. So I'm going to open it back up to each of you and ask if there's any closing thoughts or remarks that you wanted to end with today.
Lola or Carmen, do you want to start?
I will say that we need to be more supportive of each other, and I love for spaces like this to continue to happen, where we talk about our projects and look for other people that feel and are creating similar things or have similar ways of thinking around travel, right? We've been talking about sustainability for a while in our own niche and spaces, and I'm positive and hopeful that if a silver lining around the pandemic and all this crazy year that we've been living is that we are taking back into traveling more sustainably, more responsible, then maybe this is super positive for our industry, super positive for the future of our communities and the way the travel industry is going to be formed in years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. And My final takeaway would be, if you're curious about sustainable travel, but you're still not traveling yet because of the pandemic, we discussed at some point earlier today that so many of the things that we do as sustainable travelers, we can also do at home. So you can start to practice these techniques of supporting local, finding out if there's a local farm where you can order your produce rather than actually going to the grocery store, which is also going to reduce your safety risk as well and be supporting a local community, or getting your coffee from a local grinder rather than an international chain. Those little changes you can start to make in your life right now while we're staying at home and being safe, and then implement when you travel. It'll be so much easier to approach tourism with that mindset if you've already made it a habit.
Amazing. Well, I don't know. I just think for me, it's just all about gratitude. I'm really spiritual person, and I feel that as a global citizen, just while we're building this inclusive travel movement, as Carmen and Lola touched upon earlier, being supportive and having more of these conversations are great. And just knowing your worth and knowing your value. And that is something that took me many years to understand, to learn. But as a Latina, I feel it's a great time, and I'm really empowered, and I love to see what other Latinas and are doing in the industry. And I also learned a lot. I have a lot of takeaways from today's talk about sustainability, about entrepreneurship as well. So I think just having the open mindset, and that I'm always here to learn as well and to be of support. So thank you, Lola and Carmen, and thank you, Kelly, for having this amazing discussion and platform for us to have.